Did you know that 2007 saw the release of not one, but two Assassin's Creed games? The first one was an open-world social stealth extravaganza for consoles, and the second was a pixel art side-scroller developed by Gameloft and released for mobile phones of those times. I should note that there are actually several versions of this mobile title. Some have a bunch of cut content because they would have to be adapted for phones that didn't have enough memory or space, but in this video we'll dissect what is to my knowledge the full version of the title. My name is Stanislav Costiuc, I am a game designer, and this is my review of the mobile version of Assassin's Creed. We'll take a look at that fascinating obscure release, like always, with the help of my Stasocritic scoring system. Let's begin with our first category, design. This is the most important part of Stasocritic with the biggest weight, 4. Gameplay mechanics interactions are what makes games, well, games, which is why how well a title is built from that perspective is what affects scoring the most. In general, this mobile version of Assassin's Creed feels more like Prince of Persia, and it's not due to the side-scrolling perspective, but because out of the three Assassin's Creed score pillars, social stealth, combat and parkour, only the latter two are present, but it's the first one that made Assassin's Creed stand out. Yet here there is no social stealth except for some scripted moments that pay homage to the concept, and traditional stealth that exists is very rudimentary, with levels not being really built to support it. This Assassin's Creed is more about jumping around and fighting, and honestly it achieves that goal well. The levels are a fine collection of escalating challenges that are properly structured to introduce different obstacles and then create a mix of sequences using them. For example, at different points in the game you will encounter the following separately: a location where you have to wall jump to reach a higher platform, a location where you need to dash through oil to not lose speed, and a lever which opens a door for a limited amount of time. After you're familiar with all these elements, the game will provide a challenge where all of them are combined. You need to pull a lever, dash fast enough through oil to then wall jump to a higher platform where you need to reach the door before it closes. And the mobile Assassin's Creed varies the pacing and difficulty of these challenges through sequence length. Sometimes they're short, sometimes they're longer, like a section where you need to move down by swinging through poles and executing wall jumps and then moving through collapsing ledges to reach a safe spot. You never really feel like you're doing the same thing over and over again because the game's navigational elements are rarely put in the same combination of sequences, and yet there is no element that feels like it appears out of nowhere because everything is introduced properly. These are good levels. They are set in three different locations: Akka, Masyaf and Jerusalem, and each has a particular theme to it. Masyaf is based more on fire and ice elements where you need to make sure to keep yourself warm while avoiding or otherwise dealing with ice obstacles. Jerusalem is about different traps, mechanisms and navigating around those, and again all follow a nicely defined structure that is also supported by character progression. Throughout the game you'll get additional tools: grappling hook, bombs and crossbow, and not a single one of those is useless, each is required for progressing through the levels. And I can't talk about the grappling hook without mentioning how you can pull down guards with it to then use them as a platform to jump off. Just look at this. Does it make sense? No. Is it awesome? Yes. To be fair, the bombs and the crossbow are a bit less interesting and clunkier to use, but they still meet their purpose, so it's fine. After each city you'll have a little arcadey horse riding section, and honestly it's nothing special but works well enough to break up the pace. Combat in the game is pretty basic. There is essentially a single effective way to defeat each enemy type, and while you do receive different new combos throughout the game, they don't really change the flow or gameplay. Bosses are also not that exciting. They're all varied and they work, but most of the time it's about using a single strategy to defeat them. Again, nothing bad, but there is not enough depth to it. And stealth is pretty much non-existent. As mentioned before, social stealth is required only in very specific moments that exist just for atmosphere. There is some form of traditional stealth, you can assassinate people from behind as long as they don't see you, but that's pretty much it. Stealth is never really in the focus. One aspect that brings the core gameplay down somewhat and can frustrate you is purely technical. Sometimes Altair just doesn't do the actions you want him to. And I can't say that's because controls are unresponsive, because in these moments he clearly tries to do something, but he just doesn't. If that happens in particularly tricky sections, that can be very annoying. Design-wise, there is not much else to talk about. Assassin's Creed for phones is a short experience, it will take you about an hour to complete, so with not much else to discuss, let's open the Stasocritic Scores for the design category. Feel free to pause if you would like to read everything. I will assign a 7 to the mobile version of Assassin's Creed. Level design is the game's strongest aspect, it's good and well structured. The rest doesn't reach that level of quality, but generally speaking is fine. Yes, it doesn't quite feel like the console version of Assassin's Creed, but that doesn't affect the design category. Now let's talk about context. This category is about everything that provides context to players' actions, plot, motivation, world, characters, etc. It's got a weight of 1 because generally speaking, poor context doesn't prevent a game from being enjoyable, and that is certainly the case with this mobile version of Assassin's Creed. Now, it's understandable that in a game made for phones of those times, one would not be able to recreate the narrative as intricate as that of the console version of the game. But even with that in mind, you won't really get any sort of understandable picture. For what it's worth, the basic premise is there. Altair needs to kill several targets to restore his rank, and in the process learn something about the treasure that these targets were after, which leads to his master eventually betraying him. But that's pretty much it. You never really learn what that treasure does, why it is important, what the people you kill actually have done, or what being an assassin means, even in broad strokes. That's putting aside that the dialogue here is very bare bones as well. I was actually surprised to see that this game features modern day, though only at the very end as a cliffhanger cutscene. What's interesting is that it seems like the mobile version of Assassin's Creed was based on an earlier draft of the story, since at the very least some character names are different. Not that it matters really. If we take a look at all the possible scores for context, I will assign a 3. At best, what you will get is a general, very broad idea of what is the plot of this game, but you won't really understand why you're doing most of the things. Let's move on to aesthetics. This is another category with a weight of 1 because it is again about things that don't define the experience but enhance it through visual style, sounds, music, etc. The graphics in this mobile version of Assassin's Creed are really cool. The pixel art is incredibly detailed, well drawn, well animated, and serves the gameplay purposes great. All required elements and characters pop out sufficiently enough so you never have any questions if you can interact with something or not. Everything related to sound though, the only piece of music that exists plays in the menu, and it's a nice MIDI rendition of a track from the console game. Outside of that, other than little non-distinctive blurbs at the beginning and end of missions, you won't hear any music at all, while the quality and usage of sound effects is not great. It would honestly be better if the game didn't have any sound at all, as whenever something plays during combat or when you pick up an item is just jarring, doesn't fit, and there is a big lack of variety to boot. So if you open up all scores for aesthetics, I will assign a 6. Everything related to visuals is really good. Everything related to sound is not really. But the visuals are done well enough that it all still lands on the positive side of the equation overall. Time to talk about cohesion. This category has the weight of 2 and is about how well all parts of a game work together to create a wholesome, cohesive experience. Now, in the scoring for this, I utilize the word gamey a lot, but that doesn't mean that a title doesn't need to feel like a game, rather that the elements which are utilized don't need to exist just because it is a game. And the mobile version of Assassin's Creed is full of things that exist just because it is a game. The issue is not that it feels more like Prince of Persia than Assassin's Creed. It would have been difficult anyway to recreate that Assassin's Creed feeling without stealth, which is present only either as a rudimentary mechanic or a couple atmospheric moments. Why is Jerusalem full of these mechanisms and contraptions? It's a game, and that was the theme chosen for Jerusalem. Why most of the time being noticed doesn't lead to a failure, but in some particular moments you have to stay undetected? Is there a particular narrative reason for that? No, it's a game, and that's the way this particular moment was set up. Why did one of the Templars use a grappling hook that we then take? How does that fit with the world? Doesn't matter, it's a game. If I take a look at all scores for Cohesion, I will assign a 5. There is nothing that affects enjoyment negatively, but it's clear that a lot of decisions were made with just gameplay mechanics in mind, and not how it will all fit holistically with the setting and environments. Let's discuss emotions now. This category has the second largest weight, 3, because personal feelings matter a whole lot, as even a flawed experience can be very enjoyable. When I first heard of an Assassin's Creed mobile game that was released back in 2007 that barely anybody knows about, I was thinking it would be a hastily made throwaway title, something just to promote the release of the main attraction, the console version. But I was pleasantly surprised that it's not. The developers clearly had enough time to properly focus on making this good. I really liked playing the game, it is a short but solid title. And if we open up all the scores for emotions, I will assign an 8. Did the phone version of Assassin's Creed impact me in any meaningful way? Not really, but it was an hour I enjoyed playing. Let's summarize everything now. When all scores and weights are taken into account, the mobile version of Assassin's Creed gets a final Stasocritic rating of 61. I would like to note that in the context of Stasocritic, 60 is not a bad score, it means that it's a nice title that many people can potentially enjoy. If you're a fan of Assassin's Creed, definitely seek this game out, as it is a curious part of the franchise's history. If you're not, I can't say that you'll miss anything amazing by not playing it, but you will certainly have a nice, enjoyable hour if you decide to.